So it's good afternoon. So my name's Mike Brown. I think some of you in the room have already met me before and know a little bit about ONFAB, but I am a director of ONFAB. I've had the pleasure of working with ONFAB for 15 years, and this has allowed me to see and look at different types of processing parameters and good and bad pharmaceutical manufacturing. What we actually do at ONFAB is this bit here, this getting you high potent ready. So what we do is we take your manufacturing facility and your existing equipment and we place isolators upon them, flexible isolators, and therefore allow you to handle more high potent compounds. Therefore, you've got lots of different revenue streams built into the process. Okay? So we specialize in that design, the manufacture, install, and training of those flexible containment systems. Training is really important. Development of those SOPs alongside the flexible isolators helps you get really good containment performance. So what we are basically looking for around the world, because we are a global organization, and in Turkey we have lots of references for of facilities where we've already manufactured and produced isolators for some of your very good pharmaceutical companies. And today I'm here to discuss why everybody else should invest in containment technology and the reasons behind that. This presentation literally just scrapes the surface. I could probably talk to you all week about flexible containment and where we can apply it and where we can adapt it and where we can adjust your equipment to handle more potent compounds. I promise you, I'm not going to do that. I will try and finish before lunch because we don't want it to go cold, so there's lots of things to get through. Okay? What we're going to talk about is applying that containment technology and where that containment technology, those flexible isolators, can physically be applied. But first, what we're going to talk about is the need for flexible containment or flexible containment technology. So by definition, we all know that all pharmaceutical ingredients have some form of biological active, even at very low quantities. With the increase in use of high-potent active pharmaceutical ingredients, these HPAPIs, especially in oncological drugs, is proving highly effective at saving lives, but they are giving us lots of risks to mitigate against, especially in the handling of those compounds in their raw material state, and then the mixing and blending in the pieces of equipment that we've seen so far today. Okay, so those risks are associated with our process technicians, they're associated with our process engineers during those production phases. And if mistakes happen, they can be fatal. These drugs are extremely toxic in very, very small quantities. Okay, and especially now that we're working on more targeted therapeutics, okay, these zero in on specific parts of cancer cells, and this has led to even more small molecule manufacture. Okay, and teaming that up with the antibody and peptides and the ADCs and PDCs that are slowly beginning to increase in the marketplace, then we're seeing the increase in containment performance needed on your equipment to allow you to manufacture those items. There are some other reasons why, and some of them are quite scary. So we need to protect our work environment. So by containing the product being processed, you're reducing that risk of spreading it around your manufacturing facility. We've got ethical responsibilities. So those ethical responsibilities are to our operators, to our friends, our colleagues, to making sure that they have a manufacturing area that is safe and that they go home to their family at the end of the day. Okay, and then we're also talking about potentially preventing product waste. So by having an isolator, we restrict the ability of space that product can manufacture in. So you can increase your product yield through that process. Okay, and then one of the big ones is to protect against insurance claims. To protect against insurance claims. Recently, there was a pharmaceutical company that was fined $500 million. They had a contamination leak. It affected one of their operators, in which that person sadly passed away, and they had a $500 million litigation claim against them for that loss of life. One of the other things is it's good business. So when you are working with other pharmaceutical organizations, if you're a CDMO or a CRO, it's good business to show that you are containing product, that you have a facility in which that you are presenting yourself effectively. And I have worked with lots of different pharmaceutical companies. Some of those big pharmas look for ONFAB in their partners' manufacturing facilities. Okay? And then finally, there's one of reducing cleaning costs. So what we do at ONFAB is we do something that we call contain at source. Now, you'll see other isolator companies that provide a big isolator, you put a piece of process equipment inside and let you get on with the process. ONFAB don't do that. We challenge ourselves to actually physically apply the technology to where the product needs to go. Okay, so that means that you have a reduction in cleaning. So if you have a full granulator and you put it inside, you've got potential for the product to have entered into the electrical panel and so on. Whereas at ONFAB, we will contain the bowl. Okay, so just that area in which the product needs to go, we provide the isolator. There's three things on that. It's more cost effective, it's a smaller isolator, but again, that cleaning capabilities is really, really important. Okay? So, what is a HP API? So again, that's that highly potent active pharmaceutical ingredient, okay? The challenge with APIs lies in their efficacy, okay? It's intended to be toxic to those cells. We touched on that before. They typically have an occupational exposure of around 10 micrograms per meter cubed, and this means that we have to control that process, okay? So you can see the banding here, this OEB banding, 1 to 6, that is associated with an OEL of a product, okay? So every product in the world carries its own occupational exposure limit, okay? That could be your cleaning substances in your house, all the way through to these really high potent molecules that we work with on a day-to-day basis. They are predominantly expressed on a safety data sheet, okay? But there are molecules out there that we don't know how strong they are, and we have to consider those with the highest level of OEL, and therefore have those strict, tight manufacturing controls in place, okay? They also give you guide on those SDSs as how to handle them. However, that guide is normally given as PPE. Okay? And in the hierarchy of control, when you're looking at handling potent compounds, PPE is the very bottom. Thank you very much. PPE is very much the lower end of that spectrum, and we should be looking at engineering controls before we get to that PPE. We can have engineering controls, such as isolators, teamed up with PPE, but we need to make sure that we are doing more than just personal protective equipment. Okay, so just going back to these bands, as you can see here, we put this little tag here. This is where we predominantly work with our flexible isolators, in this band from 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, we saw before on the presentation that the band was 1 to 5. I've added a 6. I'm desperately trying to get the ISPE to add a 6, because the majority of the molecules that we are working with now are way beyond this 1 microgram per meter cubed of toxicity level, okay, and that OEL that they have. We have isolators now that work within the nanogram levels, and we have ADC isolators that work down in 1 nanogram. So all those isolators allow us to handle these potent compounds safely. Okay. So we also talk about when you have a site visit from an ONFAB engineer, we talk about how you're going to handle this product, and some of the guys over in the back have especially had us on site a few times before to see their processes, and we've implemented isolators. But we talk about presenting what we call a containment philosophy. Again, it could be sort of a high-level document. Some of the best containment philosophies I've seen with our clients are very, very simple. So you may talk about an OEL, a product with an OEL of around 10 micrograms, okay? So it's in this category 3, but you're running it through a mill. That mill is generating lots of plumes of dust. So we put that in an isolator. However, if you're handling an OEL product, a product with an OEL of 3, but it's small quantity on a simple bench weighing application, it might not need isolation. So you've got to have those considerations between the amount of product that you are handling, the operation that you are actually carrying out, and where that operation generates energy into the process. And that energy then will allow the product to become airborne, and that airborne product is what we're trying to control against by adding isolators into the process itself. Okay? So we have a whole range of flexible isolators, and they can support all those manufacturers all the way up to an OEB 6 classification. Okay, as I touched on, this is the sort of territory in which we are working on these isolators, this 3 to 6 band. And we cover every piece of process equipment that you can think of. We have about 6,500 designs for isolators. So whether it's a dispensing all the way through to a blistering machine and all the processes in between in an OSD facility, whether there's some biotech and so on, all that handling element that you need to do, where you need to segregate your operators from the process, we can provide isolators for that. Okay. So how do we handle these HPIs safely? So we've touched on the flexible isolator element, but with most HPAPIs, we need to be very, very wary of those dangers that we've shown in the last slide. The physical nature of every product heightens the risk involved in production. So if you have a highly micronized product, it's going to be able to become airborne much easier than a granular product. So then you need to then, as I touched on in the last section, you need to consider that in your risk mitigation, in your risk management, to make sure that you have isolators or protection in place rather than just PPE. And some of these products, when they're highly micronized, can act pretty much like gas. So they will move as a simple gesture of hand movement. They will pick up product and pass it around the facility. That difference in flowability and the quantity of the API is really what you look at when you start looking at applying a flexible isolator into the process stream itself. The MHRA and FDA do look for how you're going to mitigate those risks now. It's one of the characteristics that they look for when they are providing you with the ability to handle potent compounds in your manufacturing facilities. And those things need to go way beyond PPE now. So those engineering controls and then down into PPE. So you can see on the screen here, we have a rigid isolator. It's one way of controlling downflow booze. Our friends in EasyDoc here, this is a flexible isolator. And then your PPE at the end might be something similar to what's shown there as a Jupiter hood and control those sort of processes at the PPE stage. Okay, but in contrast to this PPE, the containment solutions segregate the operator from that process, and again, all those options are available. But traditionally, and what you see more traditionally was this rigid isolator at the end here. They're still very popular, however, they can be extremely expensive and take a lot of time for them to be implemented on your manufacturing facility. Whereas with the flexible isolator, from that initial concept right the way through to delivering the isolator and training your operators, it can be approximately 8 to 10 weeks. So it's very, very quick to get it into process, okay? Those flexible isolators, they are manufactured from a polymer, so they are manufactured from a polyurethane from ONFAB. There's also polyethylene and PVC. They are traditionally more cost effective. They have less capital expenditure in the initial purchase, and then they have an ongoing replacement of those flexible elements to make sure that you are removing also the issue of cross-contamination. Okay? So I touched on before about our engineering ethos, which is providing you with a isolator that contains a source, but also we help and generate those SOPs on the back of that isolator. That then really drives the ability to achieve really good CPT, which is containment performance testing. That CPT then can deliver those low OEB 4, 5, and 6 banding of handling, okay? So one of the things to think about here is flexible containment is the only known technology that can be deployed in all HPAPI handling scenarios. What I mean by that is if you have a valve, it can be charged. But if you think about we touched on sort of Korsch before. So on the Korsch XL100, we have isolators for charging, for changing out punches, and then for discharge onto metal checker and deduster. If you had a valve for delivery and a valve for removal, you may not have the containment in that center section. Also, we are upgrading those tablet presses from a non-contained model to a contained model, and we do that very quickly. So there's some extra bits on flexible containment, and I will very, very quickly go through some of these on the screen. If anyone has had a presentation with me before, I apologize. You will have seen this slide many times before. It's one of the ones that I deliver. It tries to highlight all the elements and all benefits around the flexible isolators, but they do have huge advantages. They can be quickly installed in different spaces and contexts. Now, one of the things that we all have in our facilities is a lack of space. And what we can do with a flexible isolator, and it's around this sort of future-proofing element, is that we're going to upgrade your existing equipment. We're going to provide an isolator onto that existing equipment that doesn't really increase the footprint of that equipment. Therefore, it means you don't need much larger space to run a flexible containment isolator. Also, when that flexible isolator isn't being used, it can be removed, and the equipment is still in its original state. Okay, some of the other benefits around on the screen is ergonomics. ONFAB spends a lot of time in ergonomics. You can imagine that working behind a barrier is difficult sometimes, whether that be a flexible or a rigid barrier. It can be quite difficult to work behind, whereas operators want to do certain reaching. We spend a lot of time working on ergonomics and trying to provide glove sleeves in the right locations and the right areas for you to carry out your operations. One of the things to talk about is the safe element. Now, I've represented that before, but we work regularly with compounds that are down into the nanogram level. And then in control, one of the things I know that most people don't have in their facility is lots of warehousing space. So what we can do at ONFAB is to provide a just-in-time delivery on those flexible isolators. So if you give us a schedule of when you are going to need these process isolators, we can deliver them just in time, so you don't have to hold lots of stock in your manufacturing facility. Okay. So the other element on this cost-effective. So some people will challenge me on this cost-effective because there is potentially an ongoing replacement cost with the flexible isolator. However, you've got to look at that against your validation and your cleaning validation and the time associated with that cleaning validation. You can remove a flexible isolator, and because we contain it at source, the areas in which we have contained is just where the product needs to go. So the only extra bit you're going to clean is the process of the equipment that has been in contact. So you can't quite see it on here, but on this granulator machine here, we've attached at the top of the bowl. So the isolator is literally containing where the bowl opens. The product goes in, and they run that granulation in situ. Now this is on a wet granulation, so there's no need for containment on the discharge. However, you can have another isolator below if you're running a dry granulation as well. Okay, and that getting to the market quickly, that is basically our industry. We need to be developing drugs quickly and getting them to market quickly, and it makes a big difference to your turnovers within your organizations of being first to that market with that new molecule or that new compound. Okay, but we have to do that without the risk of health and safety of their workers. And fundamentally, these are safety systems, okay? But they also allow you to work without affecting any quality. So I promise you now, a few slides left, and then you can ask some questions. So applications. This here is our isolator that you can see, which I touched on, which is our ADC isolator. This has been, we work with a client in the UK to test this and get this operational, and we achieve 1.6 nanograms of containment performance with this isolator. This isolator has a negative pressure main system, which is controlled by our fan system below, but it also has an additional pre-start pressure test and alarm system so that if there's anything wrong with the parameters in there. One of the differences between this isolator and other isolators that we have in the marketplace currently is there is an element in which that needs to be disposed of after use. Okay? This whole envelope, any product contacting parts, needs to be removed. As you can imagine, when you are what I call making and breaking containment, so either entering the isolator or removing something from the isolator, is where the greatest risk becomes of exposure. So this isolator has a full full envelope in which, with our fan systems here, will be completely vacuumed down at the end of the process and disposed of in your hazardous waste channels so that you have no exposure to that product. Okay? We have a proven success rate in our isolators, and we have lots, again, I touched on before, we have many different equipment contained in Turkey as well with our friends at Tema. They've really helped us be able to access some additional market for us. And some of you guys are already experiencing and benefiting from flexible isolation provided by ONFAB. Okay. Sorry, I just lost my place. So the other thing to consider when we talk about our applications is that we also are able to help GMP conditioning. So we have other isolators where we can provide low humidity inside. Maybe there's some oxygen degradation to your product or a product that is susceptible to oxygen degradation. We can provide them with a nitrogen supply. That therefore means that you can process much more complex molecules within a flexible isolator system. And we also have the ability to control the air classification inside isolators, so we're improving the quality of air inside the isolator, maybe taking it from a grade D to a grade C and beyond in the pharmaceutical isolator itself. So what we should consider, and what I hope you take away from this process, is that we're your containment partners. So both ONFAB and Tema will be your containment partners through your process of handling potent compounds. We've been working with Tema for 6 years. We've had lots of success in the Turkish market, and we've helped support lots of companies go after these more potent molecules and become patent ready in their manufacturing facilities and their R&D facilities. And it's something that we are quite proud of at ONFAB. Okay. Slide 9. So what I offer as being part of ONFAB is that you should lean on our experience. So with those 6,500 designs, the 15 years experience of pharmaceutical processing, when I first joined ONFAB, we were talking about molecules that were within that 10 to 100 microgram limit. Now we're talking about products that are down in the low nanogram limit. Now that's quite a huge curve of development through that process. And you should lean on our support to be able to support that. Now, with our design excellence, we have those 6,500 designs, so we will have an isolator for your process equipment. And what we can do is we can lean on that experience of that process isolator and develop it to fit your physical processing. And that's one of the benefits of ONFAB. We don't have individual isolators that we give you and make you work inside. What we do is we take your process and provide an isolator that is bespoke to your processing capabilities and processing parameters. Therefore, we are making the isolator fit the process rather than the process fit the isolator. And that's pretty much the reason why we have 6,500 designs. You can imagine on a mill, many different types of mill, we probably have 40 or 50 different isolator designs for mill technology. Okay, and this is our manufacturing facility in the UK. I actually put this slide up so that Ashley can see it, because she always says to me that I don't have a slide of where I work, and she hasn't seen it. So this is our manufacturing facility in the UK. We actually have 2 facilities. We have one in the UK and one in Spain. That's also a benefit for you, because if anything was to happen to one of those facilities, we have an additional facility in place. Both those facilities are ISO 9001 accredited. Both those facilities have been fully audited by various different pharma companies. I've actually got an audit in a couple of weeks' time by Sanofi. They're going to come and see our facility, and we work extensively with big and small pharma. So through that facility, we probably manufacture approximately 500 to 600 flexible isolators a month through the 2 manufacturing facilities. They go globally around the world. We're very lucky at ONFAB that we've now actually had an isolator in every territory on this planet, including right the way from Australia across the globe. And they are for many different pharmaceutical companies. So we definitely have the experience there. And here we have a few of our clients. So I always talk about AstraZeneca when I bring this slide up in most of my presentations. The reason I talk about AstraZeneca is one of the first clients that I work with. Now we work with AstraZeneca around the world in all of their manufacturing facilities. We provide them with their flexible isolators. If you have a look at some of the other clients that are on this list, so the likes of Amri is a sterile manufacturing facility that we work with. We have API production facilities. We have CDMOs, CROs. We have covered pretty much the majority of pharmaceutical manufacturing. Okay. And as I said, I was going to keep it nice and short because we were overrunning slightly.